Here we are in Chapter 7, and unfortunately, it is not quite as simple as Chapter 6. This is going to be our first route chapter since the mandatory practice battle in Chapter 2. And unlike that chapter, the enemies are going to be pretty hard to take down. Our Byleth is also not super strong right now, since we've been spreading EXP relatively thinly and we are missing out on all the experience we'd normally be getting from paralogs and quest battles. If that wasn't already enough to make the chapter sound scary, Chapter 7 also disables all units that you haven't recruited and units that aren't a student. This means that we're going to have to go without any unit that we asked for mission assistance, C-roll, and most important. As such, we're going to have to find suitable replacements for these units. We can already pretty easily recruit Ingrid as our flying rank is already pretty solid. We're also going to need a very good combat unit, because they're going to be the one taking down the entire right side of the map and eventually get to Dimitri. There are a few options, but I decided on Petra since I already been training a bit of riding to eventually recruit her, and Petra can basically one-round KO just about every unit on the right side of the map. We're unfortunately not going to be able to take advantage of the additional stats and levels we'd get from recruiting her later on, but it's going to be necessary to minimize the turns needed to clear this chapter. Thankfully, there are two special characteristics of this map that will make it easier for us to tackle. For one, there will be two different enemy factions, and they can and will attack each other. Secondly, although asking a unit for mission assistance won't let us use that unit, they will be removed from the battle completely, so they won't show up as an enemy unit. Since the generic enemy unit that replaces them will have more or less the same stats, the best course of action is to decide which unit to take off based on their personal skill and crest, if applicable. In this case, I decided to ask Felix for mission assistance since his personal skill and crest may be too much for some of my units to handle. Alright, now we're going to start the chapter. Immediately, we're going to use Stride to take control of the ballista in the middle of the map. I've moved the Stride battalion onto Ingrid since she will have Canto as a cavalier and can better keep up with the rest of the units than a 4-move unit like Lorenz. I'm going to be splitting my unit into 3 groups. The first group is going to be the ones taking control of the ballista in the middle of the map and then picking up enemies as the Black Eagles and Blue Lions fight each other. The second group is going to be Petra and Marian. Petra is going to be tasked with running down the right side of the map, eventually ending up killing Dimitri with a Thunderbrand, and Marianne is essentially her pocket healer. The third and final group is just going to be Leonie, who's going to pick off one of the Pegasus Knights at the beginning. She'll eventually join the first group and be handed off ballista duty. Although not every enemy unit is going to be a menace on this map, there are a few in mind that we have to pay special attention to. The first is obviously Edelgard. She has pretty hefty strength stat and can easily take off half Violet's HP in one attack. As such, we're going to try and get her to aggro on one of the Blue Lion troops so we can more easily close in on her with our other units. The second problem enemy is going to be the Thief replacing Petra on the west side. This Thief has a special ability that increases her void by 30, so they're going to be pretty hard to take down. However, as long as we can get one solid attack in with a bow unit with curve shot, we can finish them off with a relatively accurate attack using Violet's Gambit. The third and most troublesome unit we're going to have to deal with is a Pegasus Knight on the Blue Lion side, which replaces Ingrid. Unfortunately, recruiting Ingrid doesn't make this Pegasus Knight to be any weaker, and it shows. Not only does it fly and has 6 movement, it also one-round KOs almost every unit that we have, save Petra, who it's not going to engage with. This includes Byleth, and it can do this from 2 range. This Pegasus Knight is going to be the bane of our existence, and we're going to have to play around it the entire time we play this map. Putting Byleth here is going to aggro Ferdinand from the left side, and it's also going to draw in the Pegasus Knight accompanying him as well. Ferdinand isn't going to take a whole lot of damage. Not only does he have 15 void from his personal, he also has Armored Blow, which means our training bow is basically not going to do any damage. However, if it does connect, we can possibly disable his personal, which will make the follow-up attack in player phase a lot easier. Now that we have control of the ballista, we can start applying chip damage to enemies. Most of the enemies now are going to be in the southeast part of the map, aka on the Blue Lion side, so we're going to try and thin out their numbers. A large number of these enemies have high defense, however. A lot of them are armor knights or cavaliers, so using the ballista on them won't be very effective with its low might. Instead, we're going to try and target enemies that have low defense. One of these enemies is a mercenary that would be Felix, but we asked him for mission assistance. Although it has a high amount of HP, it actually has relatively low defense, so the ballista is fairly effective on it. The other is going to be Annette, who comes in range after the mercenary. She has the ability to one-round a lot of our units, so we're going to try and take her out as soon as possible. Unfortunately for us, the problem Pegasus Knight isn't going to usually be in range of the ballista to hit, so we have to find other ways to deal with it. We have two options essentially of dealing with the Pegasus Knight. The first is to just let it do its thing. We stay out of its range and it's just going to target Black Eagle enemies. As a testament to its strength, it can take down a lot of the Black Eagle units by itself, including Edelgard. However, it can easily be ganged up on and killed off with gambits. As such, it's not really a viable option to keep out of its range the entire time, because by the time it dies, our units are going to be typically too far away to kill other units. That leaves us with the second option. The second option is to eventually get into its range with Byleth with a training bow. We need a total equipment weight of 4 or less to not get doubled by the Pegasus Knight. So with a training bow and a leather shield, we're not only going to be able to survive, we're also going to be able to retaliate with effective damage. This will make killing off the Pegasus Knight on player phase a lot easier. And once the final generic problem unit is dead, we can focus our attention to the rest of the map. Another approach to this chapter that you can take if you have a particularly strong Byleth is to play it out like Route Emblem. Essentially equip a strong 1-2 range weapon and let Byleth kill or severely damage a lot of enemies during EP. A strong weapon choice for this would actually be the bow. At C bows you get close counter, an ability that lets you retaliate with bows at one range. This makes bows a surprisingly effective EP weapon, and it has much better stats than either the javelin or hand axe. In this case, however, our Byleth isn't quite tanky enough to survive all the enemies at hand, so we can only take a small amount of enemies at once using our Sword of the Creator. Although the low durability on the Sword of the Creator may be a cause of concern, we do get to refresh its durability twice for free. Once when it upgrades to the Sublime Sword of the Creator in Chapter 10, and again after the time skip. We still want to be conservative with its use though, and we try to use it only when we need to. Now that the Pegasus Knight is dead, we'll want to pick up the pace. We still have several enemies on both sides that we have to take out, including the thief I talked about earlier. The remaining enemies are still fairly strong, so we want to make sure our units don't fall before we wrap up the chapter. A perk of being a flyer is that you can easily circumvent the weakness to bows and the terrain immunity that you get as a flyer by dismounting. You still have a penalty when dismounting though, typically in losing strength or speed, so you want to make sure that the trade-off is worth it. This is kind of a scary position that we're putting Petra in. Our strategy right now with Petra is to get close to Dimitri by aggroing him so that we can steal his evasion ring, and then after that we can wrap up the chapter at the same time we kill the rest of the Black Eagle units. The problem is that Dimitri is surprisingly accurate, even when Petra is in the forest terrain. If Dimitri manages to land a hit on Petra this EP, we might not even be able to get the evasion ring, because if we try and steal it, he might hit us with a stronger and more accurate attack with a steel lance the next turn, and we won't be able to out-heal that with Marianne. Here's a good example of how the three-way battle can work to our favor. The thief got healed by Physic by Linhart and is now standing on a forest tile with probably ridiculous avoid. So normally this would be really hard to kill. Thankfully, this blue line cavalier managed to come in and hit the thief, which means that now we have a much easier time of dealing with the thief. After killing the thief though, we'll have to kill the blue lion cavalier. Gambits are not only useful for AoE damage and disabling, it actually comes with a stat penalty on enemies hit as well. This will affect the enemy's combat stats, like their attack damage, their avoid, their hit rate, etc., which is different than their actual stats like strength, magic, defense. And it lowers these stats by 1 plus 10% of the total stat. This can be very handy, as now gambits are a very effective way of softening up enemies as well as making sure that your own units don't die in retaliation. Petra thankfully didn't take any damage from Dimitri on EP, which means that we can now steal his evasion ring. Unfortunately, our inventory is full, so we're gonna have to just hand him our vulnerary.
I'm on it.
Our units in the middle are still quite far away from the rest of the units that we have to kill, notably Edelgard and Linhardt. Thankfully, we have one charge of stride left, and we're going to use that charge of stride to get to those enemies while taking care of Mercedes and this armor knight this turn.
I'll do my best.
There's a chest on the south side of the map that has a killer lance. We could get this, however, we're eventually going to need all of our units to finish the map in our desired turn count.
Stay focused.
It's also not that huge of a deal of losing the killer lance, since we can either just buy it later on or just forge it. A nifty addition to this game are these Aggro Lines. These lines are almost always correct in which enemy is going to attack what unit, and it only really changes if their target is either no longer available or another unit in range gets damaged and can be killed. We're using these lines to our advantage here by moving Byleth super close to Linhardt and Edelgard despite being dangerously low on HP. Since commanders act first in enemy phase, we know Edelgard is going to kill off this armor knight before turning her attention on us. Although we could use Lysithia's warp here, we're going to need her magic damage to finish off this armor knight. We'll also have Ingrid stride everyone over to the left side of the map to finish off Edelgard and Linhardt, and after that we can wrap up the chapter by having Petra finish off Dimitri.
I'll give it my all.
Archers are actually pretty nuts this game. The +1 range you get as an archer or a sniper in conjunction with curve shot or other combat arts allow you to have very flexible options when it comes to player phase. This only gets more ridiculous when you become a bow knight with +2 bow range and canto after your attack, which means you get to use unused movement after you attack. The only issue is that going the standard archer class path, which is fighter, archer, sniper, bow knight, has pretty iffy class growth. So typically if you're going to be an archer the entire time, you're going to be kind of starved on strength and speed. You can help alleviate this lack of strength by having your unit go Brigand as an intermediate class instead of Archer. That way you have a higher strength growth and you also get Deathblow after mastering the class, which gives you +6 strength and effectively +1 attack speed when initiating combat, so it's very handy. Another important point is that if you don't recruit a unit until later on, they'll typically have boosted stats than they would normally. Units that you don't recruit gain 2 levels after every chapter, and they also have boosted growths. That means if you want a unit to be as strong as possible stat-wise with minimal investment, you want to recruit them on the last chapter possible, which is chapter 12. However, if you're trying to complete everyone's paralogs, you might not have time to do that. This chapter was actually pretty hard to play out and plan out. The AI is actually pretty inconsistent with what they do, so enemies are going to end up in a different place every time that you play through it. This isn't helped by the fact that this chapter is a route chapter, which means there's no easy solution to finishing this chapter quickly. You just have to kill everything as fast as possible. And that was chapter 7 in 7 turns.